Look at all these rejects releasing their best of 2020 videos and giving out awards when the year wasn't even over yet.
The Last of Us Part 2.
Yep, the hell world that is 2020 is finally over. And to be honest, in terms of gaming, it was actually not that bad. I only got around to playing 8 games that came out last year, making 2019 one of the most underwhelming years, at least for me. But this time was a bit better. We got a lot of remakes and remasters though, and I'm going to try to avoid putting remasters on the list going forward, such as the PS4 version of Ys Memories of Celceta, which looks just like a straight up port anyway. I might give them a nod here or there, but other than that, I want to strictly focus on new games or actual remakes. There are some games I want to talk about that blur the lines here, so I'll slide them in as honorable mentions between the other entries as if they were ranked as well. Alright, enough stalling, let's get it on! I hate mobile games. I avoid them like the plague because I hate how every mechanic is tailored in a way that makes you want to pay up. However, this was a regular console spin-off. The ridiculous idea of turning historical and modern military vehicles into anime girls kept coming up the past several years, and Azur Lane was one of them, this one being specifically about naval warships, with a shit ton of lollies. And unfortunately, the game was disappointing, with a lot of the grind you'd normally associate with a mobile game creeping into this one. I mean, I didn't have high expectations going into it due to it being an Idea Factory game, but really? This is just a glorified minigame with a story attached to it. A story which I was expecting to at least be humorous, but even that rarely happened. I guess I would have enjoyed it more if I had played the mobile game, but no. I did like the sheer amount of characters they included to use, and that you can use different party setups to get different results. For example, just pick Laffy. Her torpedo spam is OP as hell. This series is FBI watchlist bait, though, I swear.
Change my state of mind.
Gentlemen.
Love so hard to find.
Got him. Shit.
Here we go again.
Alright, this entry is going to be a bit awkward given one of my previous videos. I had some expectations for Hyrule Warriors Age of Calamity. Low ones, of course. But I was wrong in several ways. Unfortunately, in ways I had not hoped. For one, the story is hot garbage. I get that they are trying to throw a wrench into the negative history that Breath of the Wild has, and also try to foreshadow other points that will probably be revealed in the alleged upcoming sequel, but the lore of Breath of the Wild just isn't all that interesting, and neither are any of its characters. The awful, cringe-inducing, poorly voice-acted English cutscenes don't help, and the story took a time travel multiverse or multi-timeline direction, exactly what I thought they were moving away from when abandoning the original Zelda timeline, and I'm done expecting a half-decent story out of the Zelda team. Anyway, the game overall is kind of a departure from the previous Warriors game, with each character having much more pronounced unique abilities instead of all of them controlling more or less the same. There's more to it, with actual verticality, aerial attacks and combos, and you have tools of the magic wands, material gathering plus cooking, perfect dodging and flurry rushing, and the Sheikah Slate from Breath of the Wild with you to give yourself various advantages in battle. And unfortunately, it feels like you spend more time using these tools than using your character's unique abilities because every strong enemy you fight in the game has infinite super armor until you hit a weak point, which is usually triggered by using one of these items. And that makes the combat feel much more repetitive than it did than just spamming attacks in Hyrule Warriors 1. Every fight is exactly the same, no matter which character you are playing as, no matter which enemy you are fighting against, even the last boss. It's unfortunately shallow, but what's more unfortunate is the game's abysmal frame rate, running at below 30 FPS for the vast majority of the game. And in an action game like this, that's just a recipe for disaster and frustration, especially for my dumbass who decided to play it on very hard. Just makes me believe we need that Switch Pro sooner than later. Anyway, I found this game pretty disappointing overall, not gonna lie. And it's frustrating to see it praised so highly on the internet with all the crippling flaws it has. Maybe it's just me, but whatever. At least I still have the original Hyrule Warriors to play instead.
How asinine.
How would you like to turn the worst of Hell's demons into waifus? And you get to be the Helltaker, set out to build an underworldly harem with them all. Sounds like a great plan, right? Well, if you play this game, which is free, you can do exactly that. Helltaker was a silly brain-racking puzzle game that went viral in early 2020 due to its humor, its meme and fan art potential, as well as the alluring price tag of $0 and being very short. So fry up some pancakes, round up your harem of demons, have a bit of a giggle, and finish off those pancakes while they're still warm. I don't know about this one, as it's technically part of a game, so that's why I'm making it an honorable mention. Xenoblade Chronicles is the best game of 2012, and the remaster we got in 2020 is the exact same game, so I don't want to include it on the list, and it wouldn't be fair since it would easily get the number 1 spot. But we also got Future Connected, a bit of extra content that's set a year after the main game's ending. It was kind of like getting DLC for a game that's been out for 8 years, I guess. And since it was around 20 hours long, well, we've all played full games shorter than that, so it's worth mentioning on the list. And it was okay. I mean, it was fun to explore a new region in one of my all-time favorite games, but it was pretty meh in other areas. I talk about it in my video about the series, so check that out if you want. What if I told you that a gem of a 3D platformer that doesn't get talked about much anymore got a remake? What if I told you that it belongs with the greats, such as Mario 64, Banjo-Kazooie, Ratchet & Clank, and A Hat in Time? What if I told you that it was a freaking licensed game? What if I told you...
I'm ready! I'm ready! I'm ready! I'm ready!
And that SpongeBob SquarePants Battle for Bikini Bottom is one of the greatest 3D collectathon style games. Yeah, it's hard to believe, I know, but it's real. And the rehydrated remake shows that it's an absolute blast to play even to this day. Though it's technically the same game, this is a remake, using a different game engine and rebuilt from the ground up, and I want to talk about it anyway. Battle for Bikini Bottom is full of the original cartoon's clever yet derpy humor, so if you have ever enjoyed the series at any point in your life, there is plenty for you to enjoy here. Hell, I'm a 30-year-old boomer and still found myself smiling and even laughing at the slapstick jokes, hundreds of references, and goofy animations throughout a world meticulously designed by people who clearly were also fans of the show, making you feel like you were smack dab in the middle of an actual episode.
Okay, just stop jumping, will you? If you take this golden spatula, will you please go away?
See, Squidward? I knew that you could help me out. You're the best.
Don't touch me.
You get to use SpongeBob, Patrick, and Sandy with all of their own abilities on a quest to save Bikini Bottom from robots that Plankton created by collecting golden spatulas. Yeah, it doesn't need to make sense really. It's SpongeBob. It's just fun. And this remake looks absolutely great, even on the Switch. Most of the time. There are a lot of texture loading issues and the occasional frame rate drop throughout the Switch version that are pretty distracting. But if you can overlook that, you can probably have fun with this game on any system. However, since it's basically the same game as the one I've already played without any extras or anything included, I don't want to put it higher on this list.
Now I can wear 4 pairs of underwear. This is great. Fresh like a spring breeze.
Alright, we got another remake here, but this one is definitely a ground-up remake that could be considered a completely different game, unlike a certain other 2020 remake that I haven't played and won't play until it's actually complete.
Get help.
This one stays faithful to the original in many ways. From what I've heard at least, since I haven't actually played the original yet. In fact, this would be the first Mana game that I played from start to finish. The remake of 1995's Trials of Mana is a very bizarre game in several ways. You play as 3 out of 6 different protagonists of your choice, meaning you have a lot of options in terms of party setups. There are some combinations of characters that will reward you with occasional dialogue, so if you decide to play it, consider looking that up beforehand. In its attempt to stay as true to the original game as possible while bringing it to life in cinematic 3D, a lot of the game's dialogue sounds stilted and cheesy, with poor voice acting that sounds like an old 90s kids anime or something. Imagine a directly translated Super Nintendo or early PlayStation 1 JRPG acted out on the big screen without any dialogue improvements, because that's pretty much what this is. It's unintentionally hilarious at several points. Otherwise, it makes you just want to skip the dialogue as it appears, which also skips some of the cutscene action as well. It's strange and kind of annoying. Aside from the obvious flaws, the game's colorful nature is rather charming overall. But with such a lighthearted atmosphere on the surface, it's surprising to witness some of the depressing, twisted, or violent undertones and character backstories the game has. I feel like there was a lot of missed potential with this remake because of this, where certain scenes are supposed to really hit you in the feels, they just miss the mark due to the way they play out. But at the same time, remaining faithful to the original source material is respectable, in my opinion, so I can't fully fault the developers for most of these issues. One thing is for certain though, the game is beautiful to look at. With a world so vibrant and lively, it's easy to want to explore every nook and cranny of each map, even if they feel somewhat cramped and not very rewarding compared to other games, which is probably just another result of the game trying to mirror the original. Overall, it's a solid game, though I think I would more likely recommend this game to younger players who haven't experienced many JRPGs before. Seems like this would be a pretty good place to jump in. Genshin Impact? Whoa, time out for a second. A Chinese mobile game on my best games of 2020? After saying how I hated mobile games earlier? Well, yeah, hypocrisy is the spice of life after all, or something. Normally I would not be touching something like this with a 10-foot pole, but hot damn, this game looks so good I had to at least try it. Unfortunately, I had to play it on the PS4. The Switch version doesn't exist yet. I'm too much of a boomer to do anything on the phone, and the PC version has a kernel-level anti-cheat system that ran even after you closed the game. Then the devs got caught and changed it on day 2. Nice try. Anyway, I have a lot I could say about this game. Let's address the elephant in the room. This game is clearly very inspired by Breath of the Wild. Nintendo fanboys like to claim it was a ripoff before they even played it, and you know what? Maybe it was. China has a reputation for making bootlegs of everyone else's shit, but I guess that every colorful open-world fantasy game with an anime-like art style will forever be compared to Breath of the Wild from 2017 onward. When you get your hands on this game, that clearly isn't the case. In fact, I think there are some things that this game does better. The combat is a lot of fun, and uses a very creative elemental reaction system that you need to exploit with multiple characters who specialize in one of 6 elements. You can only have 4 party members at a time though, so you have to choose wisely before heading into battle. Or if you're having trouble, you can even play co-op. You'll be fighting a lot too, as enemies will be around each and every corner while exploring the beautiful overworld, which is actually a lot more fun and rewarding to explore than Breath of the Wild's, due to there being a lot more hidden secrets and treasure chests. Treasure chests everywhere!
I like money.
Oh, and did I mention the game is free? Because it is. Unfortunately, once you get past like the first act and get your adventure level high enough to raise the world level by 1, you're going to notice the mobile gacha creep working its way into your enjoyment of the game, making all of the enemies across the world higher level, acting as damage sponges and making combat needlessly irritating across the board. And raising your adventurer level becomes slow as fuck past 25 or so, and you need to get it up just to be able to take on the story quests, requiring you to grind and grind and grind on a daily basis, or maybe throw a few shekels towards some extra EXP or materials, or getting a 5-star character or weapon to speed up the process. And before you ask, no, I did not spend any money on the microtransactions because I'm not weak like the rest of you.
Get help.
They clearly made this game with the intention of people either playing it for a very long time or buying their way into power, but before I had gotten to the end of the current main story, I was already sick of having to engage in combat every 5 seconds because the enemy variety runs thin very quickly. And on the PS4, the game runs like absolute dog shit. Makes me really fear for the eventual Switch version. That will probably be even worse, or they will go streaming only. And because it's an always online game, some functions such as switching characters or even just fucking picking up items were laggy as hell for me and my slow ass internet. And since it's an online Chinese game, censorship is abound. There's a lot of cons to this game, but credit where credit is due. The pros are also very strong, and it has kept me playing since release to keep up with any new content that comes along. Grinding away, mindlessly. Just remember, nothing in life is free. There's always a catch. Lots of them.
I was completely alone from the time I woke, right up until I met you 2 months ago.
Yeah, Paimon really owes you for that. Otherwise, Paimon likely would have drowned. So Paimon will do her best to be a great guide.
I bought an Ubisoft game. How does that make me feel? Disgusting, guilty, sick, shameful, revulsed. okay, it wasn't that bad, because Immortals Phoenix Rising also wasn't that bad, despite the stupid name. Aside from the usual nonsense that comes along with the typical AAA Ubisoft games such as microtransactions and online registration and time-limited events for a fucking single-player game, honestly, it's shit like this that makes buying a game like this feel like one of the 7 deadly gamer sins or something. Oh well. Didn't really interfere with the game itself, at least. I think. Anyway, this game was the only thing Ubisoft had coming out that caught my interest. Oh, yeah, and I guess I'll have to address this elephant in the room as well. Like Genshin, this is a Breath of the Wild inspired game that does some things better, other things not so much. For example, right off the bat, you're going to notice that the game feels a lot more clunky than the others. Part of it I believe has to do with the game's cartoony animations, which was deliberate to match the tone of the storytelling, which I'll get into later. However, once you get used to it, the combat is a lot more interesting due to your character, your own customizable Phoenix, having some wild movement capabilities and godly superpowers right off the bat, and trust me, you'll need them. This game also has quite a bit of puzzle solving involved, similar to Breath of the Wild's shrines, but even in the first region, some of them were quite a bit more challenging than I expected them to be, which was nice. Like all open-world third-person action-adventure with stealth elements games, getting all of these locations cleared eventually starts to feel like a repetitive chore. Fortunately, this was alleviated by the aesthetic of the overworld, with classical Greek sculptures and architecture all over the place, making it a truly beautiful type of open world we haven't really seen much of before. The story though, this definitely caught me by surprise. I did not expect this open world adventure game to basically be a comedy, and I can imagine it being a love it or hate it scenario, largely dependent on your familiarity with Greek mythology and how well the writing lands with you.
Phoenix. What a name! Phoenix! Sounds like the sound a dumb bird makes when it lights itself on fire.
I actually found myself laughing quite a bit, and cringing every now and then too, but hey, it works most of the time, I'd say. Something I wish I could say about previous entries on this list. Not only that, the soundtrack is very nice, made by the same man behind the music of Ori and the Blind Forest. Speaking of which...
Well, that's the end of Phoenix. Perfectly passable storytelling. I won't lie, there were moments that dragged, but you really got me with that ending. Now, let's settle up. Time for you to help me against Typhon.
It's not over yet. Not by a long shot.
Alright, whip your feels out. Again. Ori and the Blind Forest grabbed everyone by the heartstrings back during Microsoft's E3 2014 presentation, and has remained in people's minds ever since, gaining many accolades and several re-releases on multiple platforms. Now we have Ori and the Will of the Wisps, a very successful follow-up that expands on many of the first game's strengths. If you've played the first game, this one will feel like more of the same, which, if you want to boil it down, is an overly glorified Metroidvania game. The artwork is absolutely beautiful, with music that encapsulates the feel of the environments, and the animations are all on point, telling a story naturally, with little dialogue, though more than the first game. Both Ori games are not very long, but this time, there are a lot more side quests and NPCs, so it creates the illusion of being a longer game. As well, there are a lot more hidden things and abilities for Ori to discover for you to experiment with, and find your own style of getting through the game's punishing combat situations. Yeah. Be prepared to die a lot. Again. I mean, the game was designed around you dying a lot with frequent checkpoints and instant respawning, so it never feels frustrating. Except these chase sequences. I always hated those things. For the next game, I wanted to prepare myself before playing it. It was a revived sequel that hadn't had a game in over 25 years, and I hadn't played any of them in over 23 or 24 years. Damn, I'm getting old. Earlier this year, I bought the Sega Genesis collection for the Switch and relived a few games that I hadn't played in a long time. Golden Axe, Biohazard Battle, Sonic 1, which for some reason I'm fucking terrible at, but I can beat all the others, and lastly, Streets of Rage. I did a single run of all 3 Streets of Rage games with varying results, then got into the latest, one of the best revival games I have ever played, Streets of Rage 4. They really nailed the aesthetic of this game, and it feels like a natural continuation of the series. Axel and Blaze retain their spotlight as the two flagship characters, and we also get two new ones, Zan's apprentice Floyd, who is a slow, powerful grappler, and Cherry, the daughter of Adam, who is super quick and can bounce from target to target like nothing. Adam returns as an unlockable character, and once I started using him, oh man, it was over. I struggled quite a bit on some stages with Blaze and especially Axel, while Floyd and Cherry were good for certain situations, but whenever I was in a pinch, Adam got me out of it. It was a great experience, and ironic because Adam was always the character I used 24 years ago when I played the first game at a friend's house. It's not as challenging as the original 3 games because it has save files instead of the arcade style of lives and continues the old ones have, so anyone can jump into it without any issues. If you want, you can unlock an arcade mode after beating it though, which is nice. It's quite short for a modern game, longer than the original 3, but like the originals, it's designed for multiple playthroughs, and the amount of fantastic art that goes into each stage more than makes up for it. This next entry brought to you by your friendly neighbor Isabelle from the wonderful world of Animal Crossing New Horizons. Sometimes you just need some nice, relaxing, sweet catharsis.
Rip and tear until it is done.
Ha! What am I, some sort of filthy casual man-child?
Yes!
This is the inevitable follow-up to the impressive soft reboot we got in 2016 of the most hardcore Christian series out there. Blasting demons in Doom Eternal is amazingly satisfying with its somewhat expanded arsenal, and it also expands your general abilities with climbing, dashing, grappling, and various others to create an even more dynamic and fast-paced experience than before. This also means that each stage is more complex and labyrinthine, which makes exploration more enjoyable. But it's also quite jarring, bringing the pacing of the game to a complete halt in comparison to the combat encounters. Another new feature is the extra life pickups, which will revive you once if you die, but after that you have to continue without, and can only respawn at checkpoints. Now, I'm not very good at shooters, so I can appreciate this, but I found that it just enabled bad habits that got me killed more often later on, because it alleviates the pressure to perform well. And this got frustrating when I got to the 3rd stage, which was the biggest offender of having 0 to 100 to 0 again pacing. After that though, once I filled out more of the weapon wheel and got most of the upgrades, the game really starts to kick it up, and you have to get into the flow of things quickly, as powerful demons will be coming at you in waves and getting good and just blasting, ripping, and tearing through them all, and making it look easy, all to the beat of Mick Gordon's metal as fuck soundtrack. Never felt so damn good. Unless you're me, who spent a lot of time dying and engaging in toxic gamersalt.
Why am I toxic?
Anyway, if you haven't played this game or Doom 2016, do it. You're in for a bloody treat. What? You want me to talk about the story? Who cares? Just rip and tear and enjoy yourself. I don't really know whether or not to even talk about this game on this list, but I played both The Legend of Heroes, Zero no Kiseki, and Ao no Kiseki in 2020. Neither of these games have officially been released in English. Both of them have dated fan translations that people have been using for a while, but 2020 saw the release of the Geofront patch for Zero, a fan translation that turned out to be so good, it might as well be an official localization after all, and they are working on one for Azure right now. Not only do they translate the games, they clean up the technical side of the games as well, making them look like they run naturally on an English PC, cleaning up some low-res images, and even adding the series meme that is treasure chest quotes. They improved upon the English translation, making it sound more natural compared to the more direct translations we had previously, and similar to the official localizations we have for the Trails in the Sky and Cold Steel games, and similar to other localizations with some minor unnecessary revisions, but that's par for the course, I guess.
Bruh.
It's a great game, not my favorite in the series due to the story moving at quite a slow pace and just not having the real intense moments like Azure and some of the other games in the series, but it stands on its own merits, introducing us to some very well-written new characters, as well as featuring some of the old ones. but you'll have to play the game yourself to learn why they are so great, after playing the Trails in the Sky trilogy. Go watch my video about the Legend of Heroes series after this if you haven't. One does not simply jump into this saga. This next one is a game I went into knowing barely anything about it. In fact, I never had any intention of even buying it or giving it the light of day because it looked like yet another realistic third-person action-adventure with stealth elements game that consoles like to promote out the ass these days, despite the fact that the 8th gen consoles usually ran like shit with these games. But then, my roommate happened to buy it, so I decided to give it a shot. Boy, was I pleasantly surprised. Naughty Dog's The
Nope.
Sucker Punch's Ghost of Tsushima ticks a lot of boxes for your typical open world game that you see these days, but it also does a lot of things right. Very right. Since it is one of these types of games, playing as a samurai would normally restrict you by playing by the Samurai Code of Honor, but the story forces the main character, Jin Sakai, who miraculously survives a very one-sided battle against the invading Mongols, to rethink his methods when taking them on, to continue fighting as a samurai with fairness and honor towards the enemy that includes a great villain who exploits the samurai code of ethics to ruin them, or to stoop to their level and below, taking advantage of every weapon and tool he can get his hands on, striking ruthlessly from the shadows rather than facing them as fellow warriors. It's a great story setup that cleverly blends into the mechanics of the game, and will constantly be in the back of your mind throughout your entire playthrough, which plays into a very fitting resolution. The game's overworld is absolutely beautiful from each and every angle, despite the lacking hardware that it runs on. I have an original PS4 that still works pretty much like new, and the game did suffer from some frame rate drops when things got heavy with many NPCs, but never to a point where it hindered gameplay significantly. But what really surprised me was how short all of the game's loading times are, only lasting 5 to 10 seconds. The main thing that annoyed me about the game was that even when you're well into the final parts of the story, after playing the game for over 50 hours, the game still feels the need to stop and tell you what to do, like when you're using a combat stance that doesn't work against a certain enemy. Bitch, I played through the entire thing on hard and you still want to hold my hand? Anyway, there were nice little side collectibles such as the haikus and fox dens and all those things. But like any open world game, they were a nice diversion at first, but they lost their charm and felt like distracting busy work after doing it a few times. Petting the fox was always nice though, just saying. Okay, so we got another remake to talk about, but hey, this time it'll be different, I promise. In fact, we got 2 remakes in one. Remakes with tons of quality improvements, but with the original gameplay still mostly intact. And not only that, one of them had never been released in the West until now, so this remaster counts as an official 2020 release in my book. Langrisser, also known as Warsong when it came to the West on the Sega Genesis, and then was never heard from again. The first and second games in this niche series remade for the modern era, with more features and new artwork. That's objectively inferior to the classic artwork by Satoshi Urushihara, who has some of the most beautiful character artwork ever. Fortunately, they incorporated his artwork as well as the original music and some of the old graphics into the game, allowing you to choose between the two whenever you want, which was very, very nice, but incomplete due to them not including the original character sprites. These games are straight-up strategy JRPGs without all the fluff and nonsense that comes with the others such as Disgaea or Modern Fire Emblem. And multiple endings. Lots of multiple endings. A surprisingly large amount of multiple endings, to be honest. And while the overarching plot isn't very complex, being a series from the early 90s and all, the story takes some surprising twists and turns that kind of threw me for a loop on occasion. Especially one particular route in the first game that... well, it's basically the worst, darkest, most evil possible ending to the story they could have gone with, I think. I don't want to spoil it. Playing these games just makes me lament not having them when I was younger, because I probably would have loved the hell out of them like I did with the original Shining Force. Now, if only we could get the rest of the Langrisser series remastered too. That would be nice.
またお迎えに参ります。
What you will be seeing for this entry is either a blank screen or just the title. That's because this is the end game of a long series. Showing literally anything from this game could be considered a minor to major spoiler if you haven't played anything from the previous games. So yeah, this is all you get. It's The Legend of Heroes Trails of Cold Steel 4. A game I had been anticipating for quite a long time now, and now we finally have our conclusion to this massive saga. Really though, from a gameplay perspective, this one was just more of the same from the previous two games. A continuation of the story and gameplay of Cold Steel 3 with a plot structure more similar to Cold Steel 2, and that was perfectly fine for me. But without getting too specific, after a while, at some point in the middle of the game, I couldn't help but feel burnt out due to the story taking a nosedive into cheap fan service territory while padding out the game with unnecessary bloat and irrelevant side plots. This is largely a story-driven series, and while the game does have a lot of great moments for fans of the older games, overall, the writing got worse with the Cold Steel quadrilogy. I don't think I should say more than that for those who want to make up their own mind. I still highly recommend this entire series to anyone who wants a great JRPG saga. Just play them in the right order, please. Do it for me. I'm just gonna say it. My favorite game of 2020 is Cyberpunk 2077.
Nope.
Just kidding. I never bought it, and I'm glad. My actual favorite game of 2020 is not what I expected it to be. Probably not what you expected it to be either. You were probably expecting Cold Steel 4 given my track record of talking about that series so damn much. But there was one more game I played that really caught me by surprise that I had known little about, but decided to give a shot based off some promising footage and praise from a trusted source. My number one game of 2020 is Sakuna of Rice and Ruin. So what the heck is this about? Sakuna is a game made by a small-time Japanese developer called Edelweiss, with only 2 primary developers. It's pretty impressive what they've created here. A game that looks great, has some deep mechanics, a charming story, and is just all around enjoyable in almost every way. Sakuna is a fallen harvest goddess who is banished from the immortal realm and sent to an island full of demons to repent for her mistakes. Caused mainly by her drunken stupor and carelessness, she's quite the arrogant little twat, which leads to some very funny moments throughout the game. A game all about rice.
Got rice, bitch? Got rice?
Now, how to describe this little oddity in terms of gameplay? I'd call it a 2D action platformer and a farming simulator. Yep, the game is 2 different genres in one, depending on where you are in the game. Most areas are the former, with small Metroidvania-like stages, and a unique grappling technique using her raiment for both fighting and exploration. Most of the game's challenge comes from the combat, which has some pretty satisfying depth to it, combining your grappling abilities with melee combat to push, pull, and slam enemies into other enemies or hazards to maximize your damage. It's tricky to master, but you can pull off some pretty crazy stunts with some precise thumb work. The rest of the time, you'll be spending time playing a farming management sim, as Sakuna is a harvest goddess who must grow rice in order to regain her power.
Welcome to the rice fields, motherfucker!
Yes, that means the only way for you to level up is by successfully growing rice, which also has some pretty amazing depth to it too. It does start off tedious, but over time you unlock skills to expedite the process. There is a lot of player choice here, and the methods you use to cultivate your rice will affect your stat growth, allowing you to hone your stats based on your desired combat abilities. I actually love micromanaging things like this, so that's a big reason why this game resonated with me so well. But if you're not that type, you can choose to have the other villagers do it, or even neglect your rice, but it will make the game a lot more difficult. The majority of the game's story sequences with the other villagers take place in the rice farm area as well, and the game is very cleverly written with lots of humor throughout. They even set the game up for a sequel, and I really hope it happens. The game did sell better than they expected, so it's not out of the question in that regard either. My only significant complaint about the game is that once I beat it, there wasn't much else to do, and I wanted to keep playing. Regardless, I love this game, and that just goes to show that sometimes the best things come in small packages.
Oh, you reek of sake. I thought you were a kid.
How dare you! I am a hale and hearty adult!
Ah!
And there we go. That was all the games I played that released in 2020. It took me a while to finally get this out thanks to shipping delays and other nonsense that got in my way, But regardless, I hope you enjoyed watching this late video, and maybe you even found something you might want to give a try in the future. I can only hope. If you want to see more videos like this or any other topics, leave a comment or just press those nipples against the like button or something. You know what to do.
Stop it.
Get help.